Welcome, my friends. I'm Dave Champion. This is my co-host, Bill Carnes, and together we are totally unprepared. I almost forgot your name there because you haven't been around for a while.
Yeah, it's been 3 weeks we haven't done a show together.
Yeah. Well, it's given me an opportunity to irritate people by reprising the Dave Champion show.
It's good stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no secret that I hustle for a living, whatever I can do and scrape together, so I'm kind of a renaissance man with that. So that's kept me busy. We normally tape the shows on Wednesday for a Thursday airing, and it's kept me busy on Wednesdays. Matter of fact, it's going to keep me busy for at least a few more Wednesdays. So we'll be, as we are now, we're taping the show actually on Monday for a Thursday airing. So whatever you're watching now, we recorded on Monday the 1st. Yeah. So if there's any sort of big news events that happen from the time we're recording this till airing Thursday at 6 here on KPVM, we're not going to be able to get to.
We have a 72-hour latency.
Yeah. It's a long. What do they call that? A long delay in the broadcast.
So if we say something, you go, everybody knows that.
Yeah.
Well, that's because we've had that 3-day delay. Now, before we get cooking on what we want to talk about, because we haven't done a show in 3 weeks, we have that habit where we let the people of Pahrump know about quality businesses.
Yes, the ones that stand out.
Yeah. Now, they already know that I'm a huge fan of Fit for 10, the gym here in town.
I've heard good things.
Yes.
Nothing but good things.
Yes.
However, a lot of them come from you, but from others as well.
But
a lot of good things.
I've been in the gym. I've been in gyms since October of 1984. So I know a little bit about what makes for, and I managed a gym, so I know a little bit about what makes for a good gym, and that's why I'm such a fan of Fit for 10. Now, the interesting thing is they have a big whiteboard as you walk in or out there's at the door. And so they're running a special. I saw it on the whiteboard as I was leaving, and I thought for people who are looking to join a gym, this is the time for Fit for 10. They're running a special $99 for a year-long basic membership.
So pay up front $100, $99 for a whole year?
It's almost like at that price you can't afford not to join.
That's oftentimes just the initiation fee to spend $30 a month at other memberships.
Right. And
which I never understood. You're going to pay us a fee so that you can pay us a monthly fee.
I know, it's crazy. And there's a couple of more advanced membership. I don't remember them all. The next one up is $199. But for those people who like indoor tanning, it's unlimited tanning. And what was the other? Guest privileges. In other words, every time you come to work out, you can bring a guest. So, for instance, if your significant other wanted to come, you join, and instead of paying the $99 for the basic, you pay $199, and then she can come with you every single time for free. So it's basically like getting two, but it's not. But the good thing is, if she's unavailable, you can bring another friend. If he's unavailable, you can bring somebody else. So
it'd actually be cheaper to buy two $99 memberships because that'll only be $198.
Well, it wouldn't if you wanted to bring whomever, because then each of those would have to buy a membership.
Yeah.
The point is, whoever's interested in going with you on that day, you can bring them. Now, the second business, and you know, I love my food. Okay, I am a foodie, absolutely.
Yeah, out of the 3 restaurants you visit.
Hey. That's the benefit of going to Vegas. But you have such a broad selection. But they're right. There are restaurants here that I love, and one of them is Porta Subs. Okay.
Oh, over in the Albertsons Plaza.
Correct.
Yeah.
Between like Albertsons and Oja, right there. And not only do they have great food, but what caused me to mention them here on the show is they brought something out that, for me, is magnificent. Instead of having all the ordinary breads, they now have, in addition to those, flatbread.
Yes.
Okay? Very narrow, because I'm not a big bready guy. If I want to have roast beef, or I want to have turkey, or I want to have tuna, I don't want to have, like 1/4 of the meat and then all the, 3/4 of bread. That's not my dietary way. So they came out with flatbread. No difference in price. And wow, not only is the flavor great, but I can get all of the sandwich I want without all the bread I want. And for most people who understand, especially as you get older in life, you don't need all those carbohydrates in your diet. And I also had a chance to speak with the management, awesome people, and their service there is like lockstep. Boom, you walk in the door. They're personable, but they're efficient. It's almost like you're dealing with a machine. What would you like now? What would you like here? You go right down the line, boom, you pay, you're done. So if you want to move on, you got things to do. Not only are they friendly, but they're efficient. The food is great. So, and it's, I didn't say anything here until I've been there enough times that I can. It's that way every single time. There's consistency.
I've experienced it there as well.
Oh,
yeah.
there you go.
Good.
All right.
Good.
All right. Enough of that. Enough of letting people know about the great.
By the way, I have to remind our engineer that I forgot to start the clock. So let us know when the this whole segment starts to get over.
When we're getting in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay. The big local news. The All Lives Matter.
Yes, it's not Blue Lives Matter. It's not Black Lives Matter. It's All Lives Matter.
Okay.
Everybody's got their own thing. This is All Lives Matter.
Yes. Now, I understand this was put together by 2 teenage boys. Okay. Kudos to them for being politically active.
Sure.
And it's funny because as I looked at people's Facebook threads locally here in Pahrump, it seemed like not everyone was absolutely certain what it was about. Some people thought it was really leaning towards the Blue Lives Matter side, but they decided to call it. Other people thought it was like Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, I actually heard about it a couple of weeks before, where it was more of a Blue Lives Matter sort of an intent.
Okay.
But they were going to make a little broader scope.
Broadening it out.
Was the intention.
Greater appeal.
That's the message I received.
All right. So, Noah, let's go ahead and run that footage, just so people, if they weren't there, they can get a little idea of what's going on.
And this is outside of the courthouse and the sheriff's department.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay. That was fast, thank you.
I could have sworn that clip was like 30 seconds long, but...
oh, there we go. There they are.
Oh, hey, here's the other part of it.
Right, right. Now,
yeah, you can see the DMV in the background.
Right, right. Okay. So we see this is pretty much your ordinary, run-of-the-mill folks. It's not
they were holding
crazy,
hands,
violent.
Men, women, children.
Right. Now, the part that astounds me about this, just astounds me, and it's no surprise that I'm not a big fan of our current sheriff. And I think a lot of people think I have some axe to grind against our sheriff. And I don't. As I've often said, if she didn't run for sheriff and I met her at a dinner party, we'd probably get along. I don't have an axe to grind just for the sake of grinding an axe. I have an axe to grind because she... Thank you, Noah. We are totally unprepared. I have an axe to grind because of the things she does, not because of who she is as a person, right? And this is an exact example. For this peaceful thing, ordinary people, you saw there was a deputy there was some of the auxiliary people there, the normal people you and I see every day as we go about town. She did a full tactical SWAT call-out, including putting snipers on the rooftops. So as those people are standing out there, enjoying each other's company, holding hands, trying to make their political statements, there's people on the roof looking at them through the reticle of their 7.62 rifle. You know, and I wonder how dramatically out of touch she is with our community.
That is unfucking heard of. Seriously?
Yeah, yeah. In this community, I mean,
now,
anybody who lives here, who knows the people here.
I see it different. If I knew this was coming, which I did 2 weeks in advance, you know the sheriff's department had to know.
Yeah.
As a sheriff, I probably would have gone to some local businesses and gotten them involved. You know, hey, why don't you donate some water, some snacks, chips, whatever, granola bars, who knows what.
Right.
Maybe we could get all of our supervisory staff out there and, you know, maybe bring a fire truck over and have them look at, you know, check out cool fire trucks. Hell, have one of our newest cars there and play with the lights and sirens and... Right. And, I mean, bring people in. Don't point guns at them. They seriously
crazy
had SWAT.
And of course, Sharon was nowhere to be seen, nowhere to be found.
Bugged out?
Bugged out. And that's the story I hear. She gone. Didn't want to be there. And, you know, I've talked about the possibility of running for sheriff. And so when I see these stories, I place myself in behind the desk, the sheriff's desk. And I think, not only would I have been present, because it was about 1,000 degrees out, I would have had a table set up with water for everybody. I would have asked the sheriff, the fire chief.
That was Scott Lewis, yeah?
Yeah, I would have asked Scott to have a paramedic truck there just in case. We've got hundreds of people in the heat, making sure people, and I would have been out there meeting and greeting people, shaking their hands if they've got a message they want to put out.
Yeah, what a better PR department.
Right?
Yeah.
Complete transparency and availability, which is what Sharon promised, has never delivered on.
What an opportunity it would have been, should have been, could have been, was. What it actually was and what it could have turned into. anybody that was concerned over the operation of the department or happy for the department,
right.
What a great opportunity to mix and mingle. Maybe even talk about, hey, just so you know, here's our qualifications if you want to end up coming to workforces, what it takes to be a deputy. Here's when our next hiring process is going to be. Here's what we do.
Right.
I mean, all kinds of things. Have DARE bumper stickers out there. Does McGruff the crime dog still around, or was he put to sleep? I don't know. But all kinds of cool stuff like that would have been awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said,
but instead they actually had rifles pointed at him.
Yeah,
instead.
Yeah, it's appalling. Yeah. Speaking of sheriffs, let's transition to another sheriff, former sheriff.
Oh, we're going to go into Lee Baca.
Yes.
LA County Sheriff.
Let's tell them about that story.
Yeah, the biggest sheriff's department in the country, and Lee Baca, who in office was commonly referred to as the best sheriff money could buy. You can probably remember when Paris Hilton was locked up for 30 days. She spent about a night in jail, and then they let her go, and somehow or another, you had a $100,000 campaign contribution. Virtually everybody in the county that didn't otherwise live in an incorporated city that had a concealed weapons permit were big donors to his campaign or held benefits had events to benefit his campaign.
One of the reasons I moved out of California, because I lived in LA County before I came here, was because it was commonly known that if you wanted a CCW in LA County,
it cost you 10 G's.
10 G's to Sheriff Baca's reelection campaign. Other than that, you weren't getting one.
Yeah, so he certainly covered up for a lot of misdoings in the county lockup, in the county jails, as a lot of police administrators do. There's so many problems in the jails, and police administrators are covering these things up. And FBI is going in and finding all of these violations. What it comes down to is they presented all of this to Lee Baca. The prosecutors and he agreed, look, plead guilty to this. You'll do 6 months in a federal cell.
Well, hang on a second. Not for the abuse that happened at the jail. That's not what he's being prosecuted.
For covering it up.
Right. And I want the audience to understand, he and his subordinates, who still are very high-ranking people in the sheriff's department.
Including his second in command.
Correct.
Who's doing 5 years.
Conspired together to transfer prisoners out under false names so the FBI couldn't find them. And also attempted to intimidate FBI agents.
Yep.
Now, Sheriff Baca, had this not gone down, his legacy would have been fairly good, because he was a believer in reaching out to the community, creating dialogue, a softer style of law enforcement.
Especially in the higher crime neighborhoods.
Correct, yeah. He wanted to form better inroads with what we might call the barrio or the hood. Instead of just, we're going to beat you or shoot you, let's find a solution. So his legacy probably would have been good. Okay? But, and this is the point, you take a guy who's been in law enforcement for 30, 35 years, and you make him the top guy, what we see now just exemplifies what you get. He comes up through that system. Why do you think when he gets to the top, he's going to be any different than what that system produces?
So as it turns out, they negotiated a 6-month federal term, and the judge said, no way. Said go back to the drawing board.
He needs to spend more than 6 months in jail.
They couldn't figure out what they want. So it looks like Lee Baca might be going to trial on this.
Yes. Or he has to accept a less pleasing deal that satisfies the judge, because the judge said 6 months. No, not enough.
Yeah, not at all. And good for the judge.
Yeah, I think so.
We've got more to come right after this. Dave's Rant.
We're back. Get ready for it. What is up with the battle between either voting for one of the dominant party candidates or voting for someone else, right? And both sides have their position in this. Obviously, people from the third party say, I'd rather throw away my vote. That's the allegation of the dominant party. But you throw away your vote. I'd rather throw away my vote than throw away my principles. The perspective of the dominant party is, that you just have to go with one of the, because you know what? It's X against Y. So if you vote for Z, if you're a supporter, if you don't like Y, but you vote for Z, you're letting Y get into office. Okay. Crazy arguments. Now, not only are some of these arguments circular and endless, but this is, in my lifetime, the most bizarre, and I think I just come right out and say the worst presidential election of my lifetime. And by worst, I mean that the choices are horrible. Now, you may not agree with me, but that's my take on it. There's a couple of things going on here. First of all, the dominant party, we know what the Democrats have done. We've seen the released hacked emails. We've seen the transcripts from the released hacked voicemails. And of course, Wasserman had to step down as the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. And of course, we know that the Democratic National Committee didn't work to see that a Democrat was nominated. The DNC worked to guarantee that only one particular Democrat was going to be elected. Now, oddly, perhaps even ironically, the DNC did the same thing this time that the RNC did to Ron Paul, which was all sorts of back of the house hijinks, things bordering on illegality in order to make sure that somebody that, frankly, the power elites didn't want could not be the nominee. I'm not going to get into a whole discussion on the party apparatus as it operates from the local level all the way up and how the party apparatus creates this dynamic. I'm not going to get into that. But then we have the issue of third party. And this year, the Libertarian Party's nominee or candidate is Gary Johnson. I bring up the Libertarian as opposed to the others because the Libertarian Party is the only one that's on the ballot other than the dominant parties in all 50 states. So even though somebody might be polling well, for instance, Jill Stein in the Green Party, she might be polling well. She's never going to win because she's not on the ballot in all 50 states. That said, of course, the popular vote doesn't elect the president. The Electoral College does. And I'm not going to get into the Electoral College either. But I did want to talk a little bit about this argument about not voting for a third party because you'll ostensibly be wasting your vote. Once you get past that, I call it a nonsense argument because it is a self-perpetuating argument, right? If every single person, I don't care what side of the fence they're on politically, if every single person who said to vote for a third party, you're wasting your vote, would actually shut the hell up and vote for a third party, we would have long done away with the corrupt two-party system, and we'd have third-party president, we'd have third parties in significant numbers in Congress, right? If everybody who said that nonsense line, that self-fulfilling prophecy, would shut the hell up and vote for a third party, we wouldn't be in this boat. So I consider it a nonsense argument. The self-perpetuating aspect of it just is absurd. But now I'm going to focus on Gary Johnson because Gary Johnson is the only third-party candidate who has any sort of a chance. I'll just leave it at any sort. You can decide where on the spectrum that is. To become president. And, you know, I hear the oddest criticisms. Criticisms that, frankly, I don't hear people making in other circumstances. I'll give you an example. People from the left don't like Gary Johnson because, for instance, he supports the right to keep and bear arms. People on the right don't like Gary Johnson because they say he's not firm enough on the right to keep and bear arms. People on the left don't like Gary Johnson because they say he's going to slash social spending, which I think is an exaggeration, especially since the president doesn't have the authority to do that. People on the right say, oh, you can't vote for Gary Johnson because he's going to slash the military budget. See where this is going, right? Again, doesn't have the authority to do that as president. He is expressing his preference. Now, one of the things that I notice when you're listening to Hillary or you're listening to Trump, they say, this is what I'm gonna build a wall, or I'm gonna do this, or they're not gonna do any of that, right? Trump, the wall thing, right? I've built great walls, and I'm gonna build a powerful wall, and it will be a good wall. You will see my wall. Okay. You know what Gary Johnson said? He said, I'm going to submit a budget to Congress doing this, 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 this. Okay? He is representing his position to the voters in a realistic manner. Not, I'm going to do this, when there's absolutely zero authority for the president to do that. He's saying, I'm going to ask Congress to work with me to do this. He's the only guy out there that I'm hearing speaking that sort of common sense perspective rather than what is effectively lying to the public, which is what the other two are doing. Now, I think more so than like for instance, some people are not fond of the libertarian platform, which is not necessarily Gary Johnson's position, that we should have open borders. I'm not either, by the way. I support Jefferson 1,000%, who said, and I paraphrase, a nation that cannot control its borders has lost its sovereignty. I couldn't agree more. However, Gary Johnson is the only candidate that's running for president of the top three who has actual government chief executive experience. He has been the chief executive of the state of New Mexico. Neither Trump nor Hillary can say that. Hillary's worked in the executive branch, but she's never been the chief executive. And of course, Trump has never been in government at all. So Gary Johnson is the only one who, by experience, is actually prepared for the job. Now, the other thing that reason I tend to favor Gary Johnson, Hillary, of course, to me is a non-starter. I consider Hillary to be one of the most corrupt individuals walking the face of the earth. And clearly, Hillary's agenda in seeking the presidency is to create more wealth and power for the Clintons. I mean, there's no interest in you or me. Donald Trump, I'm going to anger a lot of people when I say this, it's my personal opinion, is a bombastic buffoon. And I've said time and again, and I'll repeat it again now, that when he gets into office, the people who believe all the stuff he said are going to be woefully disappointed because none of it's going to happen. And when I tell that to people, oh, yes, it is. And then we go through the mechanics of how it would have to go to make it happen. And they come up with the kookiest theories, things that are completely unrealistic and never even happened in the whole history of U.S. government to explain how it's suddenly going to happen tomorrow with Trump. It's nonsense. Okay? They're going to be very disappointed. It's going to be a strong disappointment, and you're going to see that disappointment. It's going to be a powerful disappointment, just like the wall. Now, one of the things about Gary Johnson is he understands the role of chief executive. So when people say, I don't like his position on that, or he's not strong enough on this, Gary Johnson understands, unlike the other two, he has a complete, full appreciation of the role of the legislature, which is the voice of the people, at least in theory. The executive branch is not the voice of the people. The executive branch, they take an oath to, what's the adjective they use? I forget the adjective that comes first, but to enforce the laws of the union, okay? Faithfully execute the law, that's the phrase from the oath. Faithfully execute the laws of the union. That's their job. A president should only veto a bill for a couple of reasons. Number one, he believes in his heart and soul that one or more provisions in the bill is unconstitutional. That Congress is assuming power unto itself that it does not possess constitutionally. Number two, that it infringes upon the rights of the people. They have unalienable rights, and if Congress is stepping over the line and infringing on those rights, he should veto it. And what he should not do is he should not veto the bill because he's acting as a master legislator. Oh, you all voted for it, but I don't like it, so I'm going to veto it. Okay? That's not the role of the chief executive. So Gary Johnson, unlike the other two, in my mind, understands that reality. So he has no intention of supplanting his own views for the decision of the people as voted on through their elected representatives in Congress. When bills come to him, he will advocate for before the bill is passed. He will work with Congress to try and make sure that the bills are something that he believes the people in the country, benefits the people and the country generally. Congress will then send him a bill. Okay? If it's the will of the people and it doesn't violate their rights and it doesn't usurp authority that Congress doesn't have under the Constitution, he'll sign it. The last third reason that you should sign it, by the way, is if he believes it places, it would compromise the oath of the executive branch members to try and enforce it. Again, that would be part of the constitutional question. I can't ask the people who work for me in the executive branch to enforce this because that would violate their oath of office. Other than those three reasons, Gary Johnson will not try and implant his personal views over your will as expressed through your legislators. So that makes him, right there alone, infinitely more desirable than any of the other two dominant candidates. Bill?
I'm not all that excited about anybody, and Gary Johnson I'm not all excited about, especially what really turns me off. There's one thing that really turns me off about Gary Johnson. That's William Weld, his vice presidential pick.
That's a common complaint, but look back at history. During the term of an elected president, how many times has the VP ever served as president? Like 3 times, I think, in history?
I'm not worried about him serving as president. I'm more worried about his influence on things. Because certain vice presidents, when they're very strong, have a lot of influence. Look at Dick Cheney, probably the most influential vice president in history.
True.
And that's recent history.
Though I think Weld was picked up intentionally to try and pick up voters from the Hillary camp.
Which very well may be, because the guy's not a very pro-gun guy.
Right.
And it's interesting with Trump, he picked a reasonable running mate, but Hillary, and this was...
I would disagree with that statement, by the way.
Hillary picked somebody who's totally unknown, never made a mark on anything, somebody that won't upstage her. And it's funny because normally at the part of a convention where you get the running mates on stage at the end, it's not what happened. You had Obama and Hillary on stage together at the end.
Right.
Crazy enough. But I'm going to rant about politicians in my segment too.
We'll be back.
It's been a few weeks. What does Bill have to rant about this time? You know what really grinds my gears? Is when you get somebody generally, and I kind of don't really care for the left-right paradigm. I'll talk about the socialists that are out there, either in public office or those who are sympathizers and supporters of those in public office, who just lie and lie constantly about things that we know. History and facts show that what they are claiming is total bullshit. Totally false, totally terrible. Yes, mark that down in the time to bleep it back there, Mr. Engineer. It's total BS what they profess. Such as you'll see these signs now that say this, and there's a diagram of a uterus, is more regulated than this, and there'll be a diagram of a gun. We all know that that's total BS. So what grinds my gears is when people of a more rational mindset will take that and Monday morning quarterback it and go on social media or something to that tune and go through where this, of course, is not the case. Here's this fact, here's this law, here's this case, here's this, that, and the other. Folks, we know this. The thing is Joseph Goebbels set the standard in World War II when he was the propaganda minister for the Third Reich. If you tell a lie, and you tell it often enough, no matter how big it is, it will eventually become known as the truth. It doesn't actually become the truth, it just seems like it. So when you get people out there that say that vaginas and uteruses are far more regulated than guns are, people will begin to believe it. When Obama says it's more difficult to buy a book than it is to buy a gun, some idiots who want to believe that, it'll start to soak in and then they'll profess it and it'll spread. And we all know, in our heart of hearts, we all know that that's total BS. So then you get people, oh, that's not the case. When did you have to go in and fill out a Form 4473 and go through an instant background check and in some days wait a few days to be able to pick up your book? We all know this. Stop arguing it. The thing is, if we recognize the tactics that these socialist commie pukes are using, all we have to do is take that same sort of thing and use it against them. You say that a uterus is more regulated than a gun? You're a sexist, and you don't like women. Is that the case? Would they actually be sexist, or are they just a bunch of blatantly lying a-holes? Well, of course they're a blatantly lying a-hole, and they're not necessarily sexist. Call them a sexist. Put it back on them. And what's the worst thing you can call anybody in this country, politically speaking? A racist, right? That is the lowest common denominator. Somebody speaks about anybody else. I see this as one of these mantras that people will do when they refer to Rush Limbaugh as a racist. The left, these socialists, they love to call Rush Limbaugh a racist. Now, I've listened to Rush many times. I'm not a regular daily listener, but I've listened to him dozens of times, and he's never even come close to saying anything near being a racist. Matter of fact, he's the opposite of that. The guy's interested in liberty, regardless of your skin color, your religious beliefs, your gender. He's an American that believes in an American culture. And that American culture comes from immigrants from all over the world. As long as you come here legally and you bring something to the table, I'd like to kick that in. So when you call Rush a racist, it's because you don't listen to him, you don't understand, you've heard it from other people. So since you've heard it so much, then he must be a racist. It's total BS. So, with that being said, and everyone out there as trying to use intellect to overcome the stupidity and the ridiculous lies of those socialists that are out there, Dave, what do you think about this? Because you've seen it.
Oh, abundantly. You know, that sigh was, what do you say when it seems that it seems? You know, but I think we tend to be more sensitive to things that irritate us, that sticks in our mind. So I want to be cautious how I go about this. Where it seems that, I'm just going to throw out an arbitrary number, 90% of the people who want to make their point politically are more than happy to lie or knowingly mischaracterize in order to influence the guy over here to join them.
And we've discussed this a couple of times.
And there was the research I brought here, and we discussed this, that said that people, this was scientific research done, that says that people who claim that they have a great deal of knowledge in subject X, this is speaking politically, the more they claim to be certain of their knowledge level, the research shows the less they actually know about the subject. And then the research went further and said, when they were presented with the evidence that their position was factually inaccurate, they didn't recant and say, I guess I got that wrong. They actually hardened their position and went further.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you say about people who, when first of all, they're willing to mischaracterize or lie, and secondly, when it's pointed out to them, they're not recalcitrant in the least. In fact, they double down.
Yeah, that's when you need to just label them with a dunce cap.
Yeah, but how do we label them with a dunce cap when it seems that's the standard?
It's unfortunate, and really, a lot of people will profess, well, it's the lawyers, which is why things are like this, or oh, it's Obama's fault, or before that was Bush's fault. You can't lay this on any one piece of history, one individual or one officer. It is. And honestly, where I see a big problem is most people tend to live by the mantra, it's not whether I was right or wrong about something, it's what you can prove. And it's on you to prove me wrong.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going until somebody puts a stop to me. So don't do what's right, do what I can get away with.
Yeah, and you know, I'm waiting for November because, you know, I talked on the show that I'm done trying to show people facts. Instead, afterwards, I'm just going to rub their nose in and tell you I told you so. But interestingly, when we talk about, you know, people being upset with the political process, when I do cardio at home. And when I do cardio in the morning, I drag my cardio device in front of the television and I watch documentaries. That's what disconnects my head from the boredom of cardio. So I've been watching some documentaries on the 60s and the 70s. And one of the things that has come through crystal clear is that in the 60s and in the 70s, when they get to the episodes they're focusing on the political going-ons of those decades, the people, the voters, are saying the exact same things about that we need to make government work for us and quit representing special interests and following the military-industrial complex and the wealthy and so forth. That the government needs to start operating in the interest of the average man and woman of America. In the 60s and the 70s, voters were saying the exact same thing we were saying in 2016. So what does that tell me? Fail.
Oh, absolutely. And I've been professing this on virtually every other show. Until we take the money out of politics, we're going to have a problem. Now, if I want to get something done at the executive level and I go in with money and I count it out, I'm getting arrested. If I want something done at the judicial level and I start doling out money, I'm getting arrested. If I go to the legislative level and I start doling out money, that's when they start listening and I can get something done.
Right. And
there's a major problem with it.
And that's when the courts say there's nothing wrong with that. Because the most absurd thing that came out of the court, in my mind, is that money equals speech. Okay? So the way this works in my mind, and I get the concept, money equals speech. I get the raw concept. But then you have the practical application, right? And the court has said time and again, its job is to look past the surface to the underlying substance of the thing, right? That's one of the principles of Supreme Court jurisprudence. Mm-hmm. You don't look at what it looks like on the surface. You drill down to what it really is. And the idea that money is speech, okay, if we take it that far and we just stop, okay? You're a man of modest means. I'm a man of modest means, okay? So apparently our speech, it's like this, okay? Somebody like a George Soros or who are those two, the Koch brothers, okay? They don't get to speak as an individual. They get to speak as a million individuals. Even though it's just them, they've got enough money that if money is speech, they're speaking a million times louder, a million times more powerful than you and I, okay? That's a problem in a place where your money is supposed to be something connected to voting, okay? If they have a million times the voice that you have, a million times the voice that I have, that's not free speech, that's dominance. That's money dominating the process.
I got to tell you, there's something, actually my father said this years ago, and I corrected him on it. This is back when he owned business and had plenty of money, and he says, I believe for every, whatever it was, $100,000 worth of value that you've got, you get one vote. And if you don't have 100, then you get one vote up to 100,000. Then every 100, I think that's what he said. I think that was a breakdown. You get a vote. So those with a lot of money get more votes. I said, really? So you really believe that the enslavement of the rich to vote for the people that would listen to them to enslave the poor,
right,
is actually the way to go?
Talk about the imbalance.
Because
right?
if that were the case, you were born poor and brought home out of an orphanage.
And you would have stayed there.
Yeah, and you would have never gotten any better than that. Alexander Hamilton fought against that.
Yeah.
Recall?
Yeah. So
I said, how can you possibly, around that same era, we're talking 20 plus years ago, when Nevada had, in their concealed weapons laws, you could carry up to 2 guns, and they wanted to get rid of that so you weren't limited to just those 2. And my dad says, why in the world would you want to carry 17 friggin' guns on you? I'm like, nobody. Why? Why would you ask that? Well, because of this proposed law change. I'm like, it's not about carrying 17 guns on you at the same time. It's about every 10 degrees worth of temperature, you might want to switch to a different gun. And you might have a couple of any one.
Right.
You know, if it's 105 outside in the summer, I'm not carrying the same gun then as I am when it's 36 degrees in February.
Did you ask him if the more money people have, the more guns they should be allowed to carry?
No, we didn't get into that. But this is during a real kind of crazy phase with my dad. He actually is quite conservative, but he had these weird things happen, and I think we got it shored up.
Okay.
Yeah, he's back in order now. Anyhow, with that being said, we'll be back in our next segment with some of your emails. Welcome back. Dave's putting down his phone while he's finishing the last email. This is segment 4 of Totally Unprepared, where we go through your viewer emails. And sometimes you send them to me, sometimes you send them to Dave. Normally they go to our email, which is where they belong, which is daveandbillshow@gmail.com. Also, you can go online and see our history, the shows that we've already put up, video, audio, and just audio in case you want to listen to it in the car, on your iPod, whatever it is. TotallyUnprepared.info. That's the place to go. That links you directly to our YouTube page. We've also got Facebook. I think we've got Instagram and Twitter and Pokemon Go and all. We don't have any of that crap. We've got Facebook, and that's about it. Facebook and YouTube, that's about it.
By the way, since we're recording so early in the week, it'll probably be a couple days till it's up.
Yeah, it probably will be. So, and with that said, we are now into month 9 of the carpet update. That roll of carpet is still laying there on top of the old carpet that's not laid down. And I got to say, Dave, as I look around, this carpet's looking far worse than it was when we were in here a few weeks ago.
I'm sure it's not getting any better. That's for sure.
I don't think it's been vacuumed in months. I literally see glitter on the carpet that was on the Christmas tree that sat here 8 months ago.
Yeah.
So
go home and clean my shoes.
Yeah, it's pretty filthy. So we have an update from the Sandra Bland car stop in Florida.
Now let's tell the audience, refresh their memory on Sandra. Sandra Bland was a black woman who, she was a teacher. She was in Texas. I forget where now. That's been several months, and I watch so many of these videos, read so many of these stories. They start to blur together at times. She was pulled over for a traffic violation by a Texas state trooper, and I believe his name was Encinia, but I might be pronouncing that wrong. It's been a while. And they had completed the traffic stop. She had signed the traffic ticket. She was giving him a little bit of what for. She wasn't too happy with him. But it was all verbal, right? You and I have experienced that. If your business is done, have a nice day. Not this guy, right?
If they want to mother F you on the way out the door.
Right. As long as you sign the traffic citation, have a nice day, get back in your unit and move on, right?
Bent away.
But this guy was a insecure, high ego person. And while she's sitting in her car with the door closed, he says, "Put your cigarette out." No basis in law for that whatsoever. Now, I have commanded suspects I was about to arrest, "Put your cigarette down," okay? Because I don't want to take the hot cigarette in the eye, right? But sitting in a car after our business is done, okay? So she says, "Why do I have to put the cigarette out in my own car?" "Get out of the car." Now the fight is, he starts trying to drag her out of the car. No legal justification. He then drags her off to the side of the road. She gets her butt whooped. He then calls his commanding officer and lies his rear end off about that. There's an audio tape of that. And you can,
the whole thing was on video, dash cam.
Most of it, yeah. But there's also an audio tape of the phone call to his commanding officer, and you can compare what the characterizations you made to the commanding officer to the videotape, the dash cam footage. It's clear the guy's an abundant liar. I mean, all you do is compare those two.
Keep in mind, a municipal cop from that area stopped to back up this state trooper.
Right. Yes, he heard the call come out and he went to back. Now, that's where things get interesting, because the backup officer.
Well, now let's finish the story with her. She died in jail.
Yes, after she was arrested, she died in custody without any reasonable explanation to this day of why she's dead. So now the backup officer has come out and said that the state trooper, who was fired, by the way, was completely in the wrong. He had, because his traffic issue was done, she'd signed the citation, there was no reason to detain her any longer, right?
Stay and escalate, really.
He had lost his legal justification to detain her, and that failure to put out your cigarette is not reasonable justification. This guy's come out and said that the state trooper was completely in the wrong, and more to the point, said he's delayed in coming out because prosecutors told him, if you come out and say that publicly, your career is going to be turned to crap.
Okay, so he finally came out with it. This whole incident happened many months ago, 7, 8 months ago, maybe. So the right response, and this is, honest to God, this is where I see the difference between a good cop and a bad cop. A good cop stops it right then and there. And we have actually seen a few videos out there of one cop getting out of hand with a suspect or suspects, and another cop coming in right then and there and saying no.
Right.
That's a good cop. 7 or 8 months later, oh, your career's going to be, no. The right thing to do.
Stop it at the time.
Is to stop it right then and there.
Now, one of the reasons I think that officers are reticent to do that is there is a long list of deputies and officers who have done that across this country and been fired.
I'm one of them, not that has been fired, but whenever I had a negative encounter with another cop, whether it was interpersonal sort of thing or they just did something so wrong that I had to do something, I would file what's called an officer's report. And that officer's report gets done, and it gets sent up within the next few days, and the watch commander on any particular shift can pull up the officer's reports there and read through them, and if anything needs to get done, they do something. If they want to notify a supervisor something about it, they do. If they want to say, whatever, it stays on the record. So it was essentially a paper trail of officer's reports on basically bad cops doing bad things. And I knew what I was doing. And it came back to bite me. They started making my job tough. I inevitably ended up resigning and going back into the industry I came from because I realized I don't want to work with people like this. And I don't want to work in a department that covers people like this.
And punishes you for telling the truth.
Yeah, because I didn't know that it was like that. I had no, when I got into the police department, I really thought it was upstanding people, higher caliber than the average citizen sort of people. And when I got in there, I realized that was not what I was dealing with. It was quite more so the thug mentality, more so than not. The thug mentality, the thin blue line, all that garbage, all that BS. And I was not going to be a part of a legally protected, organized gang.
Yeah, it's the first couple years are, if one is if one goes in high-minded, okay, if one goes in with low expectations, or maybe one goes in to be part of the thug pack, okay, then it's a wonderful experience. If that's what you're looking for, that's what you're going to find, okay? But if one goes in high-minded that the job should be done, what's the old thing? They should be held to a higher standard?
Yes.
Okay? If one goes in with that higher standard in mind, as did I, the first couple of years are, I would say, eye-opening, but that doesn't put a negative enough spin on it.
There was actually a lieutenant who I met who was out of the same area command I worked, but he was a graveyard lieutenant. And he had the same mindset as I did. And how he made it to lieutenant was a bit of a mystery. He actually had gotten into it at one point in time, but he'd always been at a higher level, but he didn't do like what I did and file officers' reports on bad things and create a paper trail. He kept his own copies of stuff in case it ever needed to come out.
Ah, okay.
Literally like sealed envelope sort of thing. Now, he was, there was somewhere around 50 lieutenants. And you know how it is, whenever you get to a certain rank, your seniority starts over. So the new, if you are the most ranking police officer there is, and you get promoted to sergeant, you're now the least ranking sergeant. And you can be the highest ranking sergeant in the entire department, but if you make lieutenant, you're on the back end. You are now the rookie.
Which is the way some guys choose not to promote.
Right.
Yeah.
So this guy, I remember his call sign at the time was 326, and I think there was 350, there was 50 lieutenants, maybe 55, so the low man was 355. He was a graveyard patrol.
3 was designation for lieutenant?
For lieutenant.
Okay.
So he was in the upper half of the lieutenants, and he was working graveyard patrol. So this shows a couple of things. Although he was trying to get out and do other things, the administration was putting up blocks because he was he walked a higher road, and he expected the people under his charge to walk that higher road as well.
No. And, you know, again, I'm toying with the idea of running for sheriff in the next election. And should I choose to do that, I have what I call an accountability package, which will require the deputies of Nye County, not suggestive, to act every day out in the field in contact with the public to that higher standard. Require it. Require means if you don't, there are consequences.
Okay, so police administrators and commanders holding the people under their charge to a higher standard is the only way to fix the police-related issues that have become so much more abundant in today's society. Not that it's happening more often, but we know a lot more about it.
Sure.
It's more prevalent because it's now out in the open. The veil has been lifted on the majority of it.
And it's so funny because you'll hear a lot of cops talk about, the higher standard, even if they're not one of the higher standard guys, right?
Sure.
It's a mantra they use, like, we risk our lives every day for you.
Sure you do,
right,
yeah.
right. So this higher standard thing, we live to a higher standard. But you watch, there's going to be a fair amount of deputies in the Nye County Sheriff's Department who are going to oppose me because suddenly that we hold a higher standard. Suddenly, when they're faced with actually having to live up to that every single day in their contacts with the public, all of a sudden they're going to be, whoa, not that guy.
It's different than speech. Now, we have one more story to get to. Let's talk about this. This is Corporal Shelley Riggs Hopkins, an 11-year veteran
of Orlando.
Was it Orlando? I know it was or was it Lakeland?
No, that was the other one.
Okay, so out of Orlando. She pulls over a guy, 64-year-old guy who was out running some errands, dropped a friend off for chemotherapy.
Right,
goes
guy.
to Krispy Kreme, grabs a couple of donuts. He's eating them in the car. She stops him for some traffic stop.
Yeah.
He's a
CCW holder.
Yeah, CCW holder.
So what does that tell us?
He's a good guy. He's gone through background.
Right.
She actually sees some of the icing from the donut on the floorboard of his car, asks if she can search the car, and he's like, sure, go ahead, which we'll get into in a second. She arrests him for possession of narcotics, thinking that the icing on the floor was crystal meth.
And says, based on my 11 years of training and experience, I can say that this is a narcotic.
Right.
She puts that in a report. It was glaze from a donut.
Yeah, and because he had his CCW on him, he got the enhancement charge of having drugs and a gun in possession.
Correct, yes.
Right. So, of course, all of this goes away when they come back and they say, it's not narcotics.
72 hours later, the lab said, it's not an illegal substance.
Spent 10 hours in jail dealing with this garbage.
Yes.
So your 11 hours of training and experience as a cop, you should know all about donuts. There's no excuse. You should know all about donuts.
My thing is, how do cops know cocaine, right? Right, as opposed to flour. Right? How about, Krispy Kreme?
Maybe she should have done a line of the icing. Yeah. Anyhow, with all that being said and done, thank you very much for showing up. We'll be back next week.
See you next week.